Going to introduce our next speaker, David A. Williamson. For most of his life, David had been deeply affected by identity confusion, racial narratives, and racial trauma, generational trauma, rigid orientation towards ideology and personality. In 2017, David suffered a tear in his aortic valve that led to a heart attack 7 days later. It was during his heart attack that he had a profound near-death experience that forever changed how he views his life and what being a human means to him. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here as usual. So I always enjoy your events. So just happy to be here, share my story.
So glad you're here. Well, you go ahead and start telling us about your experience.
All right. I guess I'll start with my childhood. I was brought up in North Carolina, a small town called Yanceyville. And it's a lot of racial tension and all that stuff. But I kind of had initially like I just played in the woods. I fished. I played with bugs. I dug holes in the ground trying to find fossils and jewels and artifacts and stuff like that. I was just deeply connected with nature. And that was where most of my attention was. But this whole racial tension stuff was always, around me. And then I started seeing the KKK marching multiple times as a child down. And I think that was when I really, really realized that, this is a real thing. Like I saw my family enraged, and I saw the people in the streets enraged. And it deeply affected me. I absorbed everything without even really understanding what was going on, without even really being connected to it. It became the narrative that my life got kind of moved in that direction just because of the experiences and seeing the tension and the polarized, views. And so that's the backdrop of my childhood, is just this racial thing and a lot of racial, violent ideation even, And then I went to summer camp, and this is something that I didn't really remember until I continued to tell my story over and over and over. And then I remembered that this happened, and this was actually one of the things that pushed me down a road of kind of just being disconnected and really depressed and kind of angry about, just being here, But I went to a summer camp at age 6, and I drowned, and I put on I saw the kids in the water, and my assumption was they all had on life jackets. So my assumption was they were probably like me. They couldn't swim, but the life jackets gave them the confidence. So I put the life jacket on and I jumped in the water. And as soon as I hit the water, the life jacket came off. I went straight down, and the life jacket stayed at the top of the water. And as I'm going down, for a while, I'm just, holding my breath and hoping that I touch the bottom and can push myself up. But and then kind of blacked out, and it was this blackness. None of this was traumatic. None of this was there was no panic. There was a moment where I realized that I probably couldn't hold my breath any longer. And then it was just this real peaceful blackness. And then I heard a voice that said, if you could touch the bottom, you could push yourself back up. And that's actually what I had been waiting for the whole time I was going down, and it just didn't seem to be happening. So my response was, I'm just going down. It doesn't seem like I'm going to touch the bottom. And as soon as I said that, I started floating back up. And as I'm floating up, again, the voice was calming. None of this was traumatic. It was all just peaceful. I started seeing the light coming through the top of the water. And then I saw a splash in the top of the water, and the rings that radiated from that splash held my attention more than me reaching up and reaching for a pole or anything, assuming that this was trying to save me. So I watched those rings for a while, and it just meant a lot to me, like those rings radiating from that splash, and seeing the light as well. So, and then I reached my hand into the middle of the splash, and I hit the pole that they had put into the water to pull me out. And when they pulled me out, my brother was there, because I pretty much had integrated this as like, yeah, something that might have happened, but it could just be a fake memory, you know. But then I asked my brother recently, like toward the end of last year, um, did I drown at summer camp? You know, when we were kids. And he said, yeah, I was standing right there on the pier. He said, you were under the water no less than 3 or 4 minutes. And I paused because I was like, I know at the time, because I used to hold my breath a lot under the water in the tub just to see how long I could hold it. And I never really could get, past 2 minutes. So when he said I was under the water no less than 3 or 4 minutes, I knew that I probably did pass out, and that probably was a voice, that I was talking to, in similar way that I had the near-death experience later. But so I went through life, and then after that, my father was in the military. So after that experience, we moved to Germany, and I started having these really vivid memories of being in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. I saw the explosions. I saw buildings crumbling. Heard people screaming, and there was a young girl running towards me. And it affected me deeply. I used to come home from school. I was in the first grade. We were in Hanau, Germany, and went to the American school. But I would come home from school and I would just cry in the corner. And my mother recently told me about it, and she said that she would pick me up, and my heart would be beating so hard and fast that like it scared her. Like she thought I was gonna like just she couldn't calm me down, and she said I would be screaming out, "I don't want to die! I don't want to die! I don't want to die!" And and I remember this, because I remember what I was seeing, and I was seeing a lot of destruction. And then I was also at that same time, and this again is after my NDE as a 6-year-old. I was seeing a timeline of the future of this country, and it was a lot of death, and that's all I really saw. I didn't see anything good, in the future. And but the death was so pervasive that like I was in a car with some people, and I remember this. And they were talking about the weather, the radio, the songs that were on the radio, and I could see dead bodies, human bodies, on both sides of the road. And as a child, I was deeply affected when I saw roadkill, animals on the side of the road. And I remember always wondering why nobody even acknowledged the dead animal that we passed in the road, or whatever. And I could just continue talking. So this was deeply, impacting for me because I couldn't understand why nobody spoke about it, And but that was the timeline that I saw for humanity at age 6, and it made me not really hopeful. And then I also felt like humans were going to use the nuclear bomb again. So I didn't really want to I didn't want to participate in this life. The race stuff made me feel small and unimportant. I had a lot of ideas about this planet and how we can make things better, but I didn't feel that I would ever be heard, or that my ideas would ever matter. So I really just kind of retreated. Became deeply spiritual, deeply interested in spirituality, but I didn't want to talk to people. I didn't like people. I didn't like anybody. The race stuff made me hate white people, and it made me hate black people who didn't hate white people. I mean, it was all irrational and it was extreme. And I ignored the sickness, the illnesses that were related to me just feeling that way for so long, that were signaling to me that you needed to do something different. I didn't pay attention to that. I didn't connect how I felt with what I was experiencing with my health. So my health was declining fast, and it was very painful. But I never changed how I felt about this life. I just wanted to leave here. And I didn't want to kill myself. I wanted to act as though I was interested, I guess, by having all of these polarizing and extreme perspectives, and expressing concern, I guess, and anger, I guess, about how things were, but not really doing anything until I just was kind of biding my time until I left. And then I left here, because you you can only experience and feel those things for so long, and ignore how it's destroying your body for so long before the body itself stops functioning. And that for me was a slow, painful process that First, it was my gallbladder. I had to get that removed because I had two stones like the size of ping pong balls when they removed it. I saw the images, and and then it was the heart attack, where my heart valve ripped on February 1st, 2017, and then 7 days later, I had a heart attack, and um, and when it happened, I'm just leaving work thinking I'm going to be back the next day. You know, what I'm saying goodbye to people. But then I step off the curb and I feel a sting in my heart because when my heart valve ripped, I didn't feel any pain in my heart or chest. It was all in my back and shoulder, so I didn't connect the two even then. But 7 days later, I actually felt a sting in my heart, and then my breathing became labored. Um, um, I get in my car. I'm trying to decide whether I'm going to call 911 or just try to go home. I decided to go home. My heart is beating, kind of weird. I'm feeling this sting, and I can't really keep my breath, so I'm breathing deeply. And I get home, I'm like, okay, I'm going to eat a snack. Maybe I'm hungry, because when my gallbladder was going bad, um, I would get really, really sick, and if I didn't eat on a schedule, and so I kind of connected it maybe with that, like it's an extreme amount of pain. But I didn't even have a gallbladder, so I don't even know why I made those two. I connected that. But so I ate the snack, nothing changed. My heart was still beating funny, feeling the stinging, and um, and then I called up to my son's mother, Trish, who works from home, and I told her that I needed to go to the emergency room. And on the way, I'm just breathing deeply. It felt like I was drowning. It's the same as when I was a child. There was no panic. It was the same kind of calmness that I felt when I was drowning as a child. And trying to keep from blacking out. I get to the emergency room. I'm speaking to the guy at the reception area, and he's trying to get me to sign papers, but my body is shutting down, and I'm not really able to, like my hands are shaking, and I'm trying to tell him, like, I please get, get some help because I'm having a heart attack, And but as I'm cussed him out like really bad, but after everything was over, I came back and apologized to him because I realized that I didn't want him to feel that way. I didn't want him to feel anything, and so after I cuss him out, as I'm cussing him out, the door opens and the gurney comes out, and they put me on the gurney, and I would say within 20 seconds I was out. But as I'm going out there, turning the corner to go into the area where they're going to be trying to resuscitate me, and I see the doors, and I look at them, and then I kind of roll on to my left side, and the last thought that I have is, this is going to be some beautiful sleep, and then I went to sleep. I passed out, and initially, everywhere there was a person, I could still kind of see energy, like dots of light, like pixelated dots of light, almost like a nighttime sky, like stars in a dark sky. And I knew that that's where people were. And but I experienced that for just a short period of time, and then I was out of my body, looking down at them, preparing me to try to resuscitate me. And I watched all of that, and I understood pretty immediately that my body wasn't working. I was dead, and I wasn't in it. And I was looking at it, and I knew all of it. I understood it instantly. And one of the first thoughts that I had I had a lot of human thoughts while I was in the emergency room that left me when I left the emergency room. But one of the first thoughts I had was, so, this is how it happens. And then I was looking at my body. I really never looked at my face, kind of like what Dennis said. I didn't have any reason that I didn't look at my face other than I didn't look at my face. you know? And it could have also been that there were a lot of people standing around me doing the resuscitation. And they could have just covered my face. I don't know. But I looked down at my body and I watched it for a while. And and there were some thoughts that came. Um, the first one was, he used to be there. He's dead. His body, his mind, and his ego was dead. And uh, I asked, well, what's left? And the words kind of just flooded in all at the same time, and it was just light, energy, awareness, soul, spirit, consciousness, and I understood. And the next phrase I heard was, "You killed yourself with your personality," and I knew immediately what that meant. And because I've been angry, depressed, um, hateful my whole life, and I was experiencing my body deteriorate as a result of feeling that way for so long. But I didn't know any other way to feel. Like I didn't have the range to feel anything else because my story and the narratives that I allowed to inform how I operated here were very polarizing and pretty, yeah, just volatile, narratives. So I didn't know any other way to be here. So it was all just negative emotion, and so I understood that, and so I watched there for a while, and then there was a woman in the back of the room who was holding her face with both of her hands that really really grabbed my attention. Um, she looked like my aunt. She had a kind of old wig on and was kind of like something my aunt would throw on if she had to entertain guests unexpectedly, Um, and I felt connected to her, and she was sad that I was dying, and it bothered me, and I wanted her to know that everything I was experiencing was beautiful, and I was trying to figure out how to communicate that to her, even though I was outside of my body, and I couldn't. I couldn't. She couldn't hear me. She couldn't see me, and but she was still kind of lamenting, that I was from what she was seeing my body going through, but I didn't even look at my body. Wasn't concerned with my body. I was concerned with her. And I was also concerned with one of the guys, the technicians that was holding the defibrillator pads. He was feeling responsible for my life. And I didn't want him to feel that way. So I felt bad about that. I felt bad that he was feeling responsible for my life and really not wanting me to die. And so I kind of watched him and I watched her. And then I casually kind of just looked up and then I was gone. I was in I knew I was out of out of Earth. I knew I was in space, but initially I was in this blackness. The void is what people refer to it as. It's I felt one with it. It felt like love. It was felt like everything was there. All possibility was there. Um, I could see images faintly kind of come and go, faces, sometimes things, places, but I couldn't, anything that I focused on the way before I could focus on it for too long. And, but I felt just one with everything there. And it felt like everybody was there as well. Like everybody was there. And then I came out of it and I was looking down into it and I could feel that same connection to it. It responded to my thoughts. Any thought that I had, it finished it. I felt the satisfaction. If there was a question, I felt the answer inside of me before the question even fully formed. If it was an idea of maybe missing somebody, I felt oneness. I felt connected to that person before I could even articulate fully that I missed them or I felt one with everything outside of the void, looking into it. And then looking around, I felt one with everything. I felt everything felt like, what we call love, but it's not like it's love. It's different. It's tangible. It felt like everything there was comprised of this, and it was what I was. It was how I felt. It was everything. It felt tangible. It felt like electricity, and and I just was amazed by everything. It was like a child. I looked at uh, I looked at the black hole for a long time, and I noticed a star forming region, like a nebula, like El mentioned, and and that amazed me. And I stared at it for a while. I noticed that everything, kind of like what Dennis talked about, everything that I looked at, I said pretty much and then I moved to it and I understood it, and most of the time I moved past it, and then I had to turn my attention back around to it, and then I understood it and the gap that I covered when I moved to it. It was like I was expanding. It was like I was becoming one with the space that I covered as I looked at things and moved through space. The star forming region was amazing. It had the cotton candy colors, the blue, the pink. and white clouds all around it, and I could see the faint lights inside of it and I just knew that they were baby stars, you know. And I didn't go into the star forming region the way that I kind of moved into everything else. I kind of stopped in the cloud and just looked at the stars that were forming, and I never really bothered it. It seemed like a place where I wasn't supposed to just barge into, even with my curiosity being as heightened as it was. I just kind of stared at it, and I saw the light that people speak about. It was up and to the right of me, and it was very far away from me, and but it still had a pull that felt almost like a gravitational pull. The light looked like a star. Um, it looked like a big star, and I I I understood I understood intuitively that going there would just be another experience, and not in a negative way, but in a way that was a created experience, an experience that I would be hopping into versus me being able to travel space and have my own experience. So I kind of just wanted to travel. So I kept looking out, even though I was aware of the light, and when I didn't move, it kind of pulled me towards it. But I wanted to move, so I just kept looking at moving, and I saw this big red rock kind of floating by. When I think about these things that I saw in terms of what's out there in space, they look like and they felt like they were actual places in space. This rock appeared to be um, an asteroid. It had like a belt around half of it. I've looked up asteroids to see if there's one similar, and the Bennu asteroid looks very similar. It has this belt um, around half of it. I also got drawn to Sagittarius A, the black hole that's in the center of this galaxy, and it seemed as though that may have been what I emerged from. Um, when I looked from the light back down into the emergency room, exactly like Elle said, my attention moved through me, and me was an orb of light, and I couldn't really determine the size of the orb that I was in relationship to other things that were in space. But I could have been a star. I could have just been a small orb of light. I don't know. But in the vastness of space, I felt very small, but I didn't feel anxiety about being out in the vastness of space. I felt one with it, and I felt that the more that I moved, I would be more and more one with it. You know, so I just wanted to move. Um, I've always had a connection since childhood to space, so that may have influenced some of this experience. Um, but when I looked back into the room, I kept looking back into the emergency room and seeing the woman holding her face. And the last time that I did that, I was resuscitated. And I remember the first thought that I had was like, damn, they woke me up, you know. But the first thing that I blurted out was, are you okay? And I was looking for the woman, and I was also looking up at the man who was holding the defibrillator pads. And I wanted to know if they were okay because I asked him if he was okay, and he cut me off. And he was like, "No, are you okay?" And then somebody from the right, they said, "You didn't feel that." And I was going to say, "Feel what?" But I looked down and I saw a gel pad, a square gel pad with defibrillator indention, like with indentions in it, the size of the defibrillator pads, and I realized, oh, I did just die. That is what just happened. I left here. I wasn't here. You know, I died. And that was when it was just confirmation in my mind, in my human mind, and you know that had happened. But I remembered it all. Um, when I left, it was all seamless. My awareness never stopped as I was dying, and my awareness never stopped when I was in space. It never stopped when I returned to the body. It was a seamless transition each time. I woke up immediately clear, and then I was very tired. And um, there was a face of a person that I saw when I laid back, and it was a young white man with a scraggly beard. He looked like Shaggy from Scooby Doo, and he had really wild eyes, and he looked at me like, and he said, "What did you see?" And I did remember everything that I saw, but the only thing that I had the energy to say to him was, and I did it with the exact same intensity that he asked the question with. I just looked at him and I said, "Blackness." and, and I laughed inside of myself, you because I know it was a whole lot more complicated than that. But that's all the energy that I had to say. And but I don't even know if that person was a real person. Like, he didn't even feel like he was in the right situation. Like, his face was like this close to my face, and I was laying down. So I'm like, well, why would he be, bent over so far and so close to my face? And was so aware of the fact that I saw something. Like, he knew that I saw something, and he just like, "What did you see?" And I felt, obliged to say something, but I didn't have the energy to say much. But but coming back, you know, I I was depressed. I was always depressed, but coming back, I was more depressed than I'd ever been because um, I knew that there was a better place, and I wanted to kind of be there. And it was the idea of coming back and hopping back into the rat race and doing this human thing. It just I couldn't even figure out how I could do that. Like, I didn't. Like Elle said, everything was stupid. All of it was stupid to me. Like, everything I had been participating in for 40 years, it was all stupid to me. Um, the things that I had centered in my life that I thought was important, they weren't important to me anymore. And any response that I had to those things, I realized that it was just out of habit. My nervous system wasn't attached to it. I wasn't triggered. It was just, these were habitual ways that I responded to these triggers or these outside stimuli, and I don't have the attachment to it anymore. So as I kept noticing that, I just stopped reacting to stuff. I'm like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. It doesn't make sense. I don't feel anything. And then something else would happen. I was like, and I would respond. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I don't feel anything. Like, so I kind of just cleaned up a lot of my behavior and kind of uh, like reflexive reactions to triggers in this life, and realized that I wasn't even attached to my identity. I wasn't attached to ideology. I wasn't attached to any of the ideas that I had centered in the first 40 years of being here. Um, and I realized after a few years, that I had spent so much time inside of my head and thinking I knew everything and being told I was a genius and all this other stuff, that I really didn't care about other people's perspectives. So I've learned now that this next 40 years of my life, at the very least 40, it's going to be about learning. It's going to be about listening to people. It's going to be about hearing other perspectives and opening up mine even further than my experience did. Um, because I spent too much time without knowing, but feeling so much about this human experience, assuming so much about things that I didn't know. I mean, I lived in a town of 3,000 people. How many white people had I seen? You know, not enough to make conclusions about the entire planet of whiteness. So all of my perspectives and all of the ways that I thought about things, it just became, silly to me, and I laughed at it. And I think that that's the beautiful part of my experience now, is that as seriously as I took myself and as serious as I took all of these ideas and the things that happen to human beings on this planet, now I view this experience as just a perfect mess. It's just perfect. And really what messes it up is not uh, uh, demons and God abandoning us. And it's just us. We are messy. We don't know how to behave. And until we learn how to behave, um, we're going to continue to experience or see around us some of the stuff that we don't don't think should be here, but it is here because it's in us. And until we start functioning here at a higher state, at a higher vibration, and stop centering the narratives and the stories that reinforce the separateness, that reinforce the division, the behavior. I mean, those are violent. The narratives that I centered at the end of the day are all violent narratives, because if any narrative that creates a they or an other ultimately is going to have an agenda on how you handle they and others, and that's ultimately ends with violence, and that's what we see. oftentimes we've seen throughout history is theys and others having to be handled a certain way because God says so. But if there are no theys and others and we are God's children, then there's always a better way of handling these things, and that's kind of, for me, being more informed about the other side of the other person's perspective is what humanizes them and what makes me see myself in them and what makes me care about the things that they care about in a way that where I can balance my desires or whatever I want out of this situation with what it is that they deserve out of the situation as well. And just humanize everybody and just make decisions that make sense for everybody. And we don't have to hurt anybody. And the people who are the most vulnerable, we just have to create systems that really, really support them. And I think that these are things that we have at our disposal to reduce what we've come to accept as like ambient suffering. We accept some of this stuff when we have the means to kind of reduce a lot of it, and I don't know if it's ideology, like so when you view yourself as saved or different or set aside, sometimes our responsibility becomes limited to those who are saved or special or set aside as well. And the circle doesn't grow, But for me, my experience went from having a very tribal orientation that allowed me to only see and experience love within a very limited framework to me now seeing it as it's just a given. Everybody is the same. Everything, we all here, we're all orbs of light. And it is a collective game. It's a collective event here. And we got to figure it out. Like, we have to figure it out. We're not waiting on someone to come to help us to tell us how to figure it out. Like, we have to figure it out. But there are some beautiful aspects of this experience that Elle and Dennis both mentioned that make the figuring out. They figured it out is going to happen, because it is a collective experience, and then we've been having it for so long, and we've been returning and leaving and coming back, having this experience over and over and over. And instead of learning from these experiences and these cycles, we've kind of concretized it in religion and made it and have looked at it as almost though this is how it happens. So at the end of every cycle, this has to happen. Apocalypses and this, that, and the other. And we don't have to agree to it, to any of this. We are the co-creators of this experience collectively. And whatever we agree to is what happens. The same way that we create our experience with our attention in this life, we create our afterlife. We create, and collectively we can create something different especially with the knowledge of what the religions have concretized for us in their books and in their stories. They've told us what we've done here before. They told us where we've messed up before, and we have that. Hindsight's 2020. But instead of looking at that as cautionary tales, as Elle spoke of as well, we look at it as if it's the script that we have to read in this life, and it's not. And so for me, coming back and being totally detached from all of the ideology and identity stuff, I realized that I was reading a script, and then reading scripts is not what we come here to do. We came here to create. And if we are in these bodies and they function a certain way, creation should occur in a way that optimizes how this body works. And if trauma and violence and war distorts this body's ability to experience this place in this realm in a clear way, then we should collectively be about the business of reducing trauma for everybody here. And that's not hard to do. We have the resources to do this.
That's awesome. You mentioned that a voice told you that you killed yourself. Did you say that? Do you remember?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Will you talk more about that? Because that's actually something that a lot of people don't talk about is that, and how we think of suicide in a traditional way, but in many ways, our thoughts and behavior and everything, we are slowly killing ourselves. So talk more about that, because that's really fascinating, I think.
Yeah, I think and I used to look at a lot of this stuff as just woo-woo or whatever, but my experience when I was out of my body and I was in space, all I appeared to be was attention. And everything that I put my attention on, I could go towards it, learn it, be one with it, understand it, fully. And when I came back here, I realized that that's the case here inside of this body. I put my attention on a lot of negative stuff. I put my attention in this life on a lot of negative stuff, and I amplified that energy inside of myself. I didn't do anything. I had no habits to direct that energy towards something external that could have perhaps generated some uh, positive chemicals inside of my body, like of accomplishing something, some dopamine release or something. I never did anything. I just stayed on the sidelines, throwing rocks and hating everything. So just not functioning here in a way that is optimal for the machine that I'm inside of. I killed myself because this machine functions a certain way, and when you understand that, you won't put it through things that it doesn't necessarily need to be through it, and feeling and emoting without ever understanding or without ever doing anything about what you're feeling and having emotions, strong emotions about, is a sure way to burn this machine out. Because just as Dennis said, I mean, I read even after my NDE that this nervous system is designed to feel an emotion for 30 to 90 seconds. And then you're supposed to move on to the next thing. But I kept emotions inside of me for 30 years plus, you know. So the part of your body where that emotion originates from gets burnt out. And I did that to my digestive system. I did that to my circulatory system. I did that to my nervous system, and my body broke down. And so when I say I did it to myself, it was by being blinded by all of these filters that we have an option to pay attention to or not. I had the option to pay attention to the race narratives. I had the option to pay attention to uh, uh, a lot of the things that I centered: the war, the negativity, the nuclear, the possibility of nuclear holocaust. That stayed on my mind. I even had ideation about how we could improve nuclear power. You know, as a teenager, I was researching thorium and understood that that was a better alternative, or to the uranium, because it was less volatile. Like the things that I experienced as a child that during my NDE made me sensitive to them. Um, I was sensitive. I had ideation about black holes, and I know I'm kind of deviating from the point, but the ultimate point that about what you're making, about your question is that attention is what created all of it. Attention is it killed me. My attention killed me because my attention was on a whole lot of negatively charged things, and I never did anything to get that energy out of me. So it just festered in me until organs started, you know, just stop functioning properly, breaking down. So.
Thank you for sharing with us, David, a dynamic experience. Katie has a question, and it's actually the same question that I wanted to ask. Depression after a near-death experience is very common, as we know. How did you integrate the NDE? How did you move on from depression? How did you handle that transition to processing it in a constructive way?
The first thing was sharing it, just talking about it, because for years I didn't, and I was just trying to kind of understand it within myself, the way that I had been living for the first 40 years and killed myself. So, it wasn't going to work. So I actually started talking to people and sharing it with people, and realized that this is not as uncommon as I perhaps thought it was, and that other people had experienced it. I had all these books, and I even have some about near-death experiences that I never really paid attention to. So I didn't even call what happened to me a near-death experience until someone said it, and I was like, oh. And then I started reading up and on it and looking at other experiences, and I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is what happened to me. And so a lot of it was my integration, and the grounding of it was first just spending time with myself for years, questioning my own sanity, questioning what happened, trying to just make sense of it, like trying to look at things symbolically and analogically versus just all logic and headiness, and I was able to do that, and a lot of it came with the help of a person that I met while I was sharing my experience on the app Clubhouse, named Zach, and who I'm working on a podcast with, and he and I, we often share these experiences, and and in sharing, the more I shared, the more I remembered. The more I remembered the, I remembered not just this life, things in this life. I remembered previous lives more clearly, um, and I remembered that there are relationships that I have in this life that are from previous lives as well. I remember that I have been the same type of person multiple times in my life. Um, I've served in capacities under people who were more volatile and violent towards humanity, and I served under them loyally. And then I served under people who had a more compassionate orientation, and I served under them loyally. And I had compassion for both orientations. So my experience in this life gave me that same orientation, compassion from both sides, because I understand disparity. I understand racial terrorism. I understand the anger and the hate that goes along with it. But I understand that if you don't do anything with that anger and hate, you're just killing yourself, and that's it. So the only critique I would have of my experience that would turn it into a different kind of story versus a cautionary tale is that when I started feeling all of those things, I should have just paid attention. I should have paid attention to it, and I should have did something else with it instead of just feeling. So for me, and that's the thing when I speak to people now, and people ask me about what do you think about activism and trying to do things that are the right way, or bring attention to doing things the right way. I said, well, let's bring attention to doing things the right way. I said, but in the mission statement of most organizations, philanthropic organizations, is they're bringing attention to problems, and they're not bringing attention to doing things the right way. They're not putting financing. They're not financing anything brick and mortar that is going to directly address the issue that they are bringing attention to. They're just bringing more attention to it. So now we have a whole marketing campaign centered around a problem instead of solutions that could fix the problem, and they act as though they're doing something. And I just don't have that orientation anymore. My orientation is if you exist in a state that you know that you want to get out of, that your thoughts should be on you already being out of that state, not just pondering the things that keep you in that state. It's exactly what Dennis spoke about. And I'm going to steal some of his colored crayons and use them, because, because the reality of it is that, and I did these things intuitively without even realizing that I used to hold on to memories of my childhood in my most miserable times just to have the brief experience of happiness and levity, even though I didn't really allow myself to stay there. But I used that. I used my memories from childhood of being in the woods as a kid and being carefree to kind of just make me remember that I felt this way. I felt happiness. I felt levity, and it helped. It helped me, and it continues to help me. So, thank you for that nugget. You know.
Thank you, David. Why don't you all come up, and we'll go ahead and let everyone, we will answer some more questions.